All right, everybody, we're going to be going back into foreclosures again. And part of the foreclosure process is going to be understanding what your state uses for security instruments. It's either going to be a deed of trust or a mortgage. And that is what we're going to be discussing in today's class in depth. How do the banks foreclose? How do the banks foreclose? Well, that's a difficult question to answer because there's 50 different states with 50 different ways to do it. And even in some states, there's multiple different ways to do it. So there are tons of different ways to foreclose. There's no way that I can sit down and teach you every single one of those ways in a class. But what I can do is explain to you what the two primary ways are, and then you'll figure out what the little nuances are within your state with some of the resources that we're going to provide below. So what is signed at the purchase of a pre-foreclosure property? What is being signed? Okay, we've already discussed this in our Understanding the Foreclosure Process class, but I need to kind of reiterate this so that way you understand. You're going to have a promissory note signed, and that is who gets paid, when they get paid, how much they get paid, and how are the payments going to be made. It's all the things regarding the payment. The promissory note is also known as a real estate lien note, but it's one of the key pieces that are being signed at the purchase of a property with debt. Okay. The second most important thing there is going to be your security instrument. The security instrument, depending on what state you're in, is either going to be a deed of trust or a mortgage. Depending on if it's a deed of trust or a mortgage, depends on if it's judicial or non-judicial, and that's what we're going to be discussing in this class today. But the security instrument is signed. Then you're going to have a blank ton of disclosures getting signed, and that is pretty much makes up that entire encyclopedia of stuff getting signed there is going to be all of the disclosures. Between the promissory note and the security instrument, you might be looking at 15 to 20 pages. The remaining 100 pages are disclosures. But after all of that is signed, you're going to get a deed to transfer the ownership. That deed transfers the ownership. So when you're at the foreclosure, not the foreclosure, but when you're at the closing, you got 4 documents. You've got your promissory note, your security instrument, a blank ton of disclosures, and the deed to transfer the ownership. If you remember in the Understanding Foreclosures video, we talked about promissory notes, security instruments, and the deed to the property. Key things that you're going to be signing when you're purchasing a property with debt. Do remember though, that a promissory note and a security instrument, when properly recorded and perfected, executed, and everything else in between, it creates a lien against the property. And that lien is what allows the foreclosure to happen. But there are essentially 2 different types of security instruments used in the United States. And that's either going to be a mortgage or a deed of trust. Mortgages are judicial foreclosures, meaning that a judge has to be involved. The court system has to be involved. Somebody has to be sued in order for that to be foreclosed on. And then you have deeds of trust, which are non-judicial, meaning no court's involvement. It's just due process. The state will have a process that says you need to do X, Y, and Z, and as long as the banks perform X, Y, and Z, the property can be foreclosed on without a judge's involvement. So we're going to learn a little bit more about the differences between mortgages and deeds of trust. Ultimately though, between mortgages and deeds of trust, they're 2 totally different processes with the exact same outcome. And that outcome is the property is sold at auction and the bank gets their money back. Let's go ahead and dig in a little deeper though and figure out what it is about a deed of trust that makes it different than a mortgage and what the benefits and some of the drawbacks to those 2 are. Taking a deeper look at deeds of trust, they are a due process state, meaning that as long as the state's rules for foreclosure are followed, you do not have to sue the borrower to get them out of the house. That is one of the key things to remember about deed of trust is due process. I do X, Y, and Z, I get the borrower out of the house and foreclose on the property. No lawsuits, no judges involved. A public document will be filed to place lien holders and creditors on notice of the pending foreclosure auction. This will give the lien holders or creditors an opportunity to try and protect their invested interest in the property. Because if you remember in our lien holding or our lien position class, we have, hierarchy. If you're first in line, you get paid first. If you're second in line, you get paid second. Well, if I'm first in line and I go to foreclose and there's not enough money to pay the second person gets completely wiped off the board. So this is a public notice letting everybody know that this property is about to go to auction, and if you're owed money, here's your opportunity to protect your interests. Once that public document is filed, the borrower will have X amount of time to repay the past due payments to get that loan going again. If they fail to do so, the property is going to be sold at auction. And we've already discussed that in the Understanding the Foreclosures video, but if they don't pay it back, it goes to auction. This is a very, very, very fast process. Since it is just simply a set list of rules that need to be followed, there are some states in the union that can foreclose on a property in as little as 21 days, technically. So all those things in consideration, you got to move fast in deeds of trust states. Other things to consider is that the property owner may have rights to redeem. These are things that you're going to need to study and figure out on your own. Look up Kansas. Find out what the redemption rights are in Kansas for a property owner that goes into foreclosure. And last but not least, we have the mortgage, also known as the judicial foreclosure. It's going to be a lawsuit, meaning they're going to have to get a judge involved, and they're going to have to get the judge's approval via a lawsuit to sell that property at public auction. They don't just go out and do X, Y, and Z and then sell it. They have to go get a judge and get that judge involved and get that judge permission to sell this property at public auction. Key points for the judicial foreclosures: we're going to file a complaint and summons in the local courts to get this lawsuit started. Then a lis pendens will be filed in the public record, putting creditors, lien holders, and other people on notice that there is a pending lawsuit and this property is about to go to foreclosure. Lis pendens is Latin for lawsuit pending. If the homeowner loses this court case, the judge will enter a judgment against the borrower, allowing the bank to sell the property at the foreclosure auction. Just like deeds of trust, depending on what state you're in, you may have rights of redemption within that state. It's part of your homework to go out, look at some of the links that we have below, and find that information out. If you're in Kansas, I'm fairly certain Kansas is a redemption state. In the state of Texas, tax deeds are also redemptions. So you're going to need to do a little bit of research on your own to find out how the things work in your state. Unlike deeds of trust though, mortgages can be a very lengthy foreclosure process. This can take 6 months to a year. Unlike deeds of trust, you're talking about 30 days to maybe 3 or 4 months. With a judicial foreclosure, you can count on this being 6 months to a year for this process to move forward. Some key talking points and homework for you to do following this class is to research your state and learn more about your security instruments. What security instruments are controlling your state? Is it a deed of trust or is it a mortgage? I've got links below for you to do your research in, but beyond just finding out if it's a deed of trust or a mortgage, really dig in and find out what the process is. Okay, maybe go out and go to your county clerks and say, you know what? Let me look at a mortgage and then see what it looks like when it's recorded. Go out and find a deed of trust if you're in a deed of trust state and look at that. And what you may find out is that some states have both. Texas, for instance, has both deeds of trust and mortgages. Most people don't know that. But in Texas, we are predominantly controlled by deed of trust. But if you look further and above and beyond that, if you get a home equity line of credit, home equity lines of credit in the state of Texas are controlled by mortgages, meaning they are a lawsuit. So make sure you pay attention to those things. Go out, find out what they are, find out what the timelines are, record those timelines, and find out specifically what's happening in your state so that way you have a better understanding of how the process works for you. As always, if you have questions, leave them in the comments below. My team and/or myself will respond as fast as possible to make sure that any questions that did not get answered in this video for you or any clarifications that you need will be taken care of. And outside of just the video content that you're seeing here on propelio.com/academy, we also have facebook.com/Propelio app where we share videos and we go live doing interviews with other successful investors, as well as youtube.com/Propelio for other informational stuff. Check it out.